You know that feeling, right? Replaying a conversation, a mistake, or just a painful memory over and over in your head, wishing you could just let it go. It's so frustrating, and honestly, it can make you feel trapped. But what if I told you that struggling to move on isn't actually your fault? What if it's a predictable, totally normal outcome of how your brain is wired? Let's dive into the psychology behind why it's so hard to let go. I think it's a feeling almost everyone can relate to, being anchored to something that's already over, making it almost impossible to be fully present in your own life. If that sounds even a little bit familiar, well, you are in exactly the right place. And this, right here, is the most important thing to grasp from the get-go. This isn't about a lack of willpower or some kind of personal failing. It's about the very mechanics of your brain, how it weaves together memory, emotion, and even your sense of who you are. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we're going to understand why your brain is built to hold on so tight. Then, we'll get real about the high cost of that cycle. And finally, the most important part, we'll build a practical framework to help you change your relationship with the past so you can actually free your present. First up, let's completely reframe the problem. The core idea here is that when your brain is clinging to a memory, it's not trying to hurt you. It's actually just, well, it's trying to do its job. See, your brain's primary goals are pretty simple: survival and making sense of the world. So when something significant happens, it latches on. It's trying to figure it out, learn a lesson from it, and most importantly, protect you from having to go through something similar ever again. The intention is protective, even if the result feels totally destructive. Okay, so if your brain is trying to help, how exactly does it get so stuck? This brings us to the 5 main psychological reasons that make the past feel so sticky. So, first up is this really fascinating thing called the Zeigarnik effect. The easiest way to think about it is like a cliffhanger in your favorite TV show. Or maybe like having way too many open tabs on your computer browser. Your brain just craves closure. Completed tasks, it files them away. But unfinished business, that just keeps nagging you, demanding your attention. And that whole open tab idea explains perfectly why we loop on certain memories. If an event felt unfair to you, or the reasons why it happened are unclear, or it just feels completely unresolved, your brain flags it as unfinished business, and it keeps pushing it to the front of your mind, desperately trying to close the loop. Second, and this is a big one, not all memories are created equal, not by a long shot. When an experience is emotionally intense, your brain's emotion center, the amygdala, and its memory center, the hippocampus, they team up. They basically stamp that memory with a high priority tag. And the result? The memory is way more vivid, it's triggered more easily, and it's so much harder to just dismiss. It feels alive. Third, think about what happens when you're not really focused on anything. You know, when you're driving or taking a shower, your brain switches over to what neuroscientists call the default mode network. It's kind of like your brain's autopilot. And where does it love to wander? You guessed it, straight back to the past, replaying events and spinning all those what-if scenarios. It's basically your brain's natural screensaver. Number 4 is huge: identity attachment. This is when an experience shifts from being something that happened to you into being a core part of who you are. And when that happens, letting go suddenly feels really threatening, doesn't it? It feels like you'd be losing a piece of your own identity. And finally, there's the illusion of control. This is that sneaky belief that if you just think about something enough, you'll somehow understand it or maybe even fix it. But here's the thing: the past is fixed. Replaying it over and over doesn't lead to a resolution, it just digs that mental rut even deeper. So you can see how these 5 things, which all start from a protective instinct, can quickly spiral into something pretty harmful. And that brings us to the very real cost of getting stuck in what's known as the rumination cycle. And this is pretty much exactly how that toxic cycle works. It starts with a trigger. That trigger brings back the emotion, just as strong as it was before. Then your mind jumps in, trying to analyze it, to solve it, but since the past can't be solved, no resolution is found. And so, the loop repeats. And each time it does, that neural pathway just gets stronger. And the downstream effects of this are really serious. This isn't just about feeling bad for a little while. We're talking about chronic stress, anxiety, and keeping your mind constantly focused on what was instead of what is. And ultimately, you lose your presence. It becomes incredibly hard to create new positive experiences in your own life. Okay, so that's the problem, but what's the solution? This is where we pivot, because letting go isn't about forgetting. It's about changing your relationship with the past. And here's a framework for exactly how to do that. So this right here is the crucial shift. Analyzing is thinking about the event. That's the loop we just talked about. Processing, on the other hand, is allowing yourself to actually feel the emotion tied to it, the sadness, the anger, the grief, without judging yourself for it. And that simple act of just feeling is what finally allows the emotional charge to release. Here's a really practical way to manage this. Set a boundary, a timer even. Give yourself a controlled 10 to 15-minute window to journal about it, think about it, whatever you need to do. But when that timer goes off, you make a conscious choice to shift your focus to something else. This contains the rumination instead of letting it hijack your entire day. So these are really the pillars of that new framework. First, you have to accept that closure has to come from you, not from anyone else. Second, you have to separate the memory from the meaning you've attached to it. Third, you actively work to ground yourself in the present moment. Fourth, you start building a new, future-oriented identity. And finally, and this is so important, you learn to replace that harsh self-blame with self-compassion. Let's make this really concrete. The event itself, that's a fixed fact, but the meaning you assign to that fact, that is a choice. You can actively reframe the narrative from, say, "This proves I'm a failure," to something more like what you see here. "This was a difficult experience, but it doesn't define my worth." And all of this brings us to our final section. What does it actually mean to let go? Because the goal isn't to erase the past. It's to stop it from taking over your present and your future. And this isn't just some nice-sounding metaphor. This is real neuroscience. It's called neuroplasticity. Your brain can literally change. Every single time you notice yourself drifting back to that old memory and you gently redirect your focus to the present, you are physically rewiring your brain. You are weakening that old pathway and building a new, more intentional one. So let's be crystal clear about the goal here. Success is not forgetting the memory ever happened. Success is when the memory comes up and it no longer hijacks your emotional state. It becomes one chapter in your story, not the only book you're forced to read day in and day out. And really, that's the heart of it all. This work isn't about trying to erase your history. It's about reclaiming your present. It's about taking back your attention and your energy so that you can fully live in the here and now. The past happened, but your present, that's yours to create.